during a race day, you also like that. Like you're nonstop flying, nonstop fixing, nonstop like doing things. They fly full acro that we call, so it's full manual mode. It can do flips and rolls and all kinds of different, maneuvers.
Someone who doesn't have a drone, has never built a drone before, but they want to do it. What's your number one piece of advice? So, you want to start building your first FPV drone, but you don't know where to start. You look online, there's parts everywhere, there's different aircraft, you don't know where to start. X-frame, dead cat frame. Well, we're here today with Ignacio Romero, someone who has built drones professionally and runs KwadsRus here in Metro Vancouver. We're going to talk to him about building drones for FPV. We're going to talk about building drones for cinema. And we're going to talk to him about different aspects of building drones, the different challenges with building drones. And we're going to get straight into it.
So it sounds like we're going to talk about building drones today.
We're going to talk about building drones today.
Also building drones.
And building drones.
Morning, Ignacio.
Morning.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we've kind of known each other a few years now. You're a local here in Pitt Meadows area.
Yep.
And doing some cool stuff, right? Like you've brought a couple drones here we're going to talk about that you've built.
Mm-hmm.
And also racing and a bit of cinema work.
Yep.
So yeah, what's your story, man? How did you get into this to start with?
I would say maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
I built my first drone being the DJI Flame Wheel.
Oh.
That was my first one. I crashed it many times. It broke many times. And that's how you learn. You just, go on YouTube. You see some people doing it. You try. Then you retry, until it flies, and then you crash it again.
Yeah.
And since then, I've been nonstop building and just enjoying the hobby.
So you started before consumerization of drones, really?
Pretty much. And even before then, I had like these little toys that you buy from Banggood and other like Chinese platforms.
Yeah.
But they would never last long. And
Yeah.
that's how I think most people started with just like cheap toys, and then you upgrade it until.
Wow.
Yeah.
So take a step back from drones real quick, just to set the stage. What was your background before? Like, these aren't exactly easy to get into.
Not really. Even though today it's getting easier and easier. I have a software engineering background.
Okay.
So I was really into computers. There's some mix with computers in here because the flight controller, you tend to program it, not with code, but with settings.
Yeah.
And also, I think the cross path with development, software development, is the modularity of
Yes.
these things.
Yeah.
So you tend to understand, okay, this is a component, that this is what it does. Then you start investigating what kind of components should I be using. And then, you start from there based on, the specs or like the application that you want to, use this for. Then you start to understand and look online, what to use.
Would you say 10 years ago, like as you're saying this, I'm thinking about, it's kind of like you're a chef, right?
Yep.
You're
Pretty
10
much
year ago,
cooking drones.
there was just ingredients and no recipes.
Yeah.
And you were figuring out what worked and what didn't. And
Yes.
What turned into a 5-inch souffle and what didn't. So
Yeah, exactly.
But now, because we attempted to build a drone 2-3 years ago, and it turned to smoke.
Yeah, tends to happen.
Yeah, it tends to happen. It worked great for about 30 seconds, and then it didn't. But I was really fortunate that you helped me out with like picking up a recipe for the hardware side of it, and then the software was a solved problem. Right?
Yep.
There's so many different pieces of software out there, or flight controllers out there. So we'll kind of jump around a little bit, but like when it comes to building drones, where's the best place to start right now?
So I would say that if, say, for example, somebody that just wants to get started and enjoy this hobby, I would say to avoid some frustrations, there's some drones that they call them BNF, so bind and fly.
Okay.
These are already pre-built drones. It's a great start because you already have a drone that works and flies,
Right.
which is most of the time people just want to fly, they don't want to build.
Yeah.
And then the good thing with this is that then you can upgrade or you can change some parts. Maybe you're gonna crash it, you're gonna burn the motor, then you'll need a fourth motor. So might as well just get 4 new motors and
Right.
just swap them and try different components as you go.
Yeah.
I think that's the best approach. If you're more into, tinkering and your ways of doing, then, you can go and get some, recipes for drones. There's some pretty cool websites out there to get those recipes. For example, one is rotorbuilds.com.
Right.
And you can see so many drones compositions that people have there. The links for the stores are already listed. So you don't have to kind of like come up with a new solution. Most of the solutions already kind of figure it out, even though you can still, come up with something new. But at least it's a good start.
Yeah, that's a cool. Rotor Builds is kind of like, I think about building computers. There's a really popular site called PC Part Picker.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you're
pretty much
totally new, right, it gives you a list of all the different things that you're going to need, the motors, the flight controller, the frame. One of the challenges I had was I find hardware changes very quickly in the flight controller space. So like I smoked my flight controller, need to get a new one. Well, I can't get the exact same one. It's really difficult.
It's back ordered.
Yeah, exactly. And that was 2 years ago, so it might as well not exist anymore. It's gone to dust, right?
Yep.
So you're constantly iterating on that, and it's kind of like computers where you buy a motherboard 4 years ago, it's probably going to be hard to get now, right? Yep. Everything's constantly marching on and developing at a rapid pace.
Yes.
So I guess the question is why, right? Why are we doing this when I've got here the 135 gram Neo, I've got the Avata 2 here. Why would we build something?
Well, I think it really depends on the application, right? Like, when you compare DJI's Avata with FPV drones, even though both are FPV, I think this has a different, goal. One is, easier flying, safer flying, I would say.
Yeah.
The other one is filming. It has 4K video capability and other features, whereas these others, they don't really have a full HD camera per se.
Right.
You can mount one on top of it, but it's a different kind of approach, because when we mount cameras, it goes from the GoPro to the DJI Osmo, is it?
Oh, yes, the Osmo is their action camera.
Yeah. And then you can add bigger cameras. But I would say it's a different approach. Also, the FPV drones, they fly full acro, that we call, so it's full manual mode. Yeah. It can do flips and rolls and all kinds of different maneuvers that the Avata could probably do, but not the same way. It's a different kind of flying. They use different flight controllers, different firmware. These are more tuned to kind of like mellow flying. These are like hardcore flying, fast paced, it's a completely different approach. So I think both are good tools depending on what you want to do.
Yeah.
I personally find building a lot of fun. I enjoy the building as much as I enjoy the flying,
right?
Because you can tinker, you can customize, you can add things, you can remove things, you can blow up things, and it's kind of part of the fun as well.
Yeah. How many drones do you think you've built?
Oh, way too many. Maybe like 50 or maybe a bit more. Like personal, I also build for cinematic and other applications. I also build for people.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. You've got a few film credits to your name for building and flying, I think.
A few, yeah.
So what's the biggest one that you can think of?
So far, the biggest one has been Transformers,
okay.
The Rise of the Beast, that we filmed in Peru, in Machu Picchu.
Wow.
Great movie. Would recommend.
Well, visual effects, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's those kind of blockbuster movies. They're not amazing.
Don't talk about movies with Finn. He ages me every time.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Michael Bay Transformers series.
Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, I've done a few filming, mostly commercials. It happens here in BC sometimes, mostly in Alberta.
Okay.
Because it's the more scenic kind of environment.
Right.
But yeah, I've been doing some of that. But I mostly enjoy the hobby. I try to fly and race more. It's not really. I'm not too hardcore into the filming.
So what would you say the differences and challenges between building something small like this and then something for film?
It's bigger, much bigger. It's heavier too. These, you can, mess it up and crash and burn, no biggie. When it's something bigger, the stress levels are higher, not only because the amount of work that you've put in and how expensive the hardware is, but also because at one point you're going to be carrying a 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand payload, which is not yours. So the pressure is a bit higher. There's definitely more testing, definitely more tuning as well, until you fully confident that you can send it. Sometimes we fly over people, over locations that are very protected by parks and so on. So there's like no room for mistakes.
Yeah.
Luckily, there's diversity, quad diversity these days. It's a bit safer in a sense.
And diversity, you're talking about the multiple radio streams.
Multiple radios, multiple, stronger video signals. You can do 60 megs a second video signals now, or even higher if you want to hack it. So there's a bit more of that. But still, like when we fly these FPV drones for filming, they're still kind of like on the hobby grade because we use hobby graded parts. Which unfortunately we are big beta testers of these parts. So
True.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Whereas with DJI stuff, they've gone through a whole process of R&D, and they've been tested so intensively where like they always work, or 99% of the time work. Whereas these, they tend to fail sometimes, depending on how you build them and so on.
We're talking about like a $1 billion research and development program versus
a homemade
Ignacio in his backyard.
Exactly.
So for these big film drones, are you purchasing bodies and then fixing parts to them, or are you laser cutting in fiberglass like your own bodies, or 3D printing?
Yeah, there's a lot of 3D printing involved. There's custom design for the frames. We get them cut sometimes from China, sometimes locally from CNC Madness here in Chilliwack. And there's also, we get the parts mostly from China, motors, ESCs, flight controllers, you name it. But it's another recipe that we come together with. We test, fly, we realize, these motors are not, powerful enough for this kind of payload. We need to swap the whole motors. They're a bit different as well because when we use these big cine lifters that we call them, instead of having 4 motors, we have 8. We call it the X8. So essentially, it's an quad, an octocopter, but with 2 motors, one aligned with the other one.
Yeah.
It helps for redundancy, but it also helps for a higher lift.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Yeah, more because they're in like a push me, pull me kind of
one is push and the other one is pull, so they kind of work together that way.
So you mentioned earlier about building, you need some tinkering skills. So I'm guessing you need to know how to solder to build one of these. Any other tinkering skills? Would someone who is getting started in this, would they need to have some experience in a computer automated design or a CAD software? Not
necessarily, because if you get the parts online, you can get all these frames and all these parts on your own. If you want to tinker even more, yes, you can design your own, you can cut your own, you can 3D print your own. You can do everything on your own.
Both of these seem to have some 3D printed accessories on them.
Are
those just for fun, or?
They all have actually, a reason for. For example, in this one, we call this the fin. So it's a turtle fin. So when the drone is upside down, you can flip it over by just spinning 2 motors, and then it goes back on position so you can take off, for example.
Cool.
Some of the parts are for mounting the cameras and so on. On that, all the little drone, you have more 3D printed parts. Some are on the end of the arms. Those are for protecting the carbon fiber, and also to protect the venue because we fly them indoors. So that way we don't wreck the venue. There's also a fin on the top. Again, the camera mount on the front. But those are the ones that we race indoors. They're called the tiny trainers. So they're essentially like a replica of the Drone Racing League, the DRL, just a smaller version.
Is it safe to plug in?
Yeah, you can plug it in. It has LEDs on. It's very appealing for the pilots and also for the audience just to follow through, with the LEDs.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Drone Racing League runs a formula-style drone approach.
Yes.
And they have like a, what is it? Is it a 5-inch size?
It's 7-inch propellers. So this one, for example, here, it's a 5-inch diameter propellers. They use 7-inch propellers. So 7-inch propellers tend to be slower spinning. And the reason for this is because it's more built for audience.
Right.
So it's not about going super fast. It's mostly for going very precise and kind of slower pace and more visually appealing because it has all the LEDs that this one has even more.
Well, and I'm sure in the VOD now we're ripping off your YouTube channel and showing some of your flying from when you fly, and it's impossible to keep up with. Like how fast your brain and your fingers.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. You have to kind of pre-turn. You have to think things ahead and just start moving as you go because it's going so fast that you have to maneuver that way.
So let's talk a little bit about racing. You mentioned DRL. We'll get back to the cinema. A couple more questions about like the bigger stuff, but like Drone Racing League is in our world of drones is arguably pretty huge, right? Like this is a major, like I immediately think of like the XFL. Like there's this really big push to make this big, and they're in Vegas, they're in major events, they've been all over the world. You've worked with some locals. Gab 707 is a DRL pilot, and he's in the cinema space as well. But there's this world of it, and then there's MultiGP.
Yes.
Now MultiGP is it purely Canadian, or is this?
No, this is U.S. based.
Okay.
It's a different league than the DRL,
Right.
Drone Racing League. And it's more about grassroots drone racing.
Okay.
There's chapters of MultiGP worldwide. We are one of them. We are called KwadsRus. So if you look us up on YouTube or Facebook, that's what we do.
Absolutely plugging it.
And then
Go for it.
and there's multiple chapters of MultiGP in Canada, in the States, in South America, in Europe, and they all come together. It's basically a platform to get all the drone racers together and just enjoy the flying and the racing in local fields.
Okay. And we were talking a little bit before, but DRL is a formula style race.
Yes.
Right. So it's 7-inch prop frame. They're on like version 5 or version 4.
They're still on version 4, and today they just announced it. And apparently, it's still the 4, but with some tweaks. But it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have their own formula in a sense. Like they have their own drones. They provide the drones to the pilots. The pilots are on the roster. They're like the top pilots of the world. And they do live events in big stadiums, and sometimes they do also live events in simulators and so on. But they've been on ESPN, on NBC, on all the different TV in the US and online.
Yeah. And those drones, so those are provided by the league. Can you even practice outside of the?
Yes.
Okay.
They give them a few to practice with.
Okay, so you can fly outside of events to at least like your own personal F1 car, basically, right?
Yeah.
But in MultiGP, it's like you said, grassroots. Everyone's building their own frames in certain prop size class or weight class or what?
Yeah, so there's different classes on MultiGP. So this one we call an open class. Essentially, it's a 5-inch. You can fly anything, but because the open class tends to be at a faster pace, you tend to go with this solution, which is 5-inch propellers, these kind of motors that are 2207 size, and so on. But now they also have they call it a Prospect, which is very similar to the Drone Racing League, also 7-inch, very similar weight. It's a different frame. They don't provide the frame, but they have one specific frame that you have to use, for example.
Okay.
They also have Tiny Whoops, which is a different kind of flying. These are more for indoors. They're like 18 grams, 19 grams weight with the camera, with the battery and everything. They just fly very differently, but they're basically this is the father of this guy. That's how it evolved.
Yeah.
Then people made them bigger with cameras and so on. Then DJI kind of like evolved from that. And there's also the micros that we call. That's a different spec for racing at MultiGP.
Okay, so this falls into the sub 200 gram category?
Yes. Well, they don't go by weight. They call them micros.
Right.
We, here in Vancouver, we call it the 200 gram series.
Okay.
So that's 200 grams max. And the reason we do 200 and not 250 is because you can build a 5-inch slightly lower than 250 grams, and it would be not very fair. So 200 grams kind of sets the cap, and it opens, to possibilities of innovation with some, creativity. You can go pretty fast still with 200 grams.
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen these things rip around, and they're incredible.
Yeah.
So are you flying purely indoors when you do these, the 200 gram?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We rent different venues in the lower mainland, mostly in Abbotsford, Chilliwack, just because it's cheaper, more accessible. But we used to do Richmond, Burnaby, and many other places.
And how big of a venue do you need to do this?
Not too big. I would say maybe like 50 feet by 50 feet is good enough. The bigger, the better, because then we can just, set up a bigger track. But we don't really need a lot of space. For these little ones, we can even do a little race here in here if you wanted to.
Do like the 3D hoops all around the room?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like you don't really need much space, right? But these, for example, you definitely need more space because they go from one corner to the other like in 2 seconds. So you need a much bigger real estate for that.
Yeah. Was it 2 years ago we were at Abbotsford Air Show and we had the tent? And we had tiny whoops flying inside the tent at the air show, which was super cool to see.
Yeah, that was fun.
So you've got a couple events coming up for MultiGP. Where and when could those be found?
So I think the easiest way is to download the app for MultiGP on your iPhone and Android. Okay. If you search MultiGP, or we also call it RaceSync, you can see your nearby races. So if you're on the lower mainland, you would see all the nearby races that we got planned for this winter. You can come as a spectator, or you can sign up as a pilot as well. You don't really need much certification when you're flying indoors. You just need something that it's called the MAC, which is a membership that you pay annually just for insurance. It's the Model Association of Canada. As long as you're part of that, you got the insurance, you're covered. You're also covering for the venue. Yeah. That's pretty much it. So we already have events for January and February posted as well, so people might see them on the same time.
So you talked about flying indoors, so there's no regulations indoors. Is that one over 250 grams?
With battery and everything, it's about 535, something like that.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you, so either for this or for films, have you ever tried to get a safety assurance declaration for a home-built drone?
I have not. No.
Is it just you looked at the requirements and was like, it's not worth it, or?
Well, not really. I mean, when we fly these, it's generally for hobbying, and even though we are flying on, there's a couple things that changed recently. Through MAC, we used to have an exemption with Transport Canada, which they lost very recently. Yeah. Since then, everybody is required to have at least their basic certification, but we are not supposedly required to yet register these drones through Transport Canada because we are supposed to be flying them at a MAC sanctioned field.
I was going to ask that about the registration side.
Yeah. So I don't think... But don't quote me on that. I'm sure somebody knows more than I do. We haven't, through MAC, been requested to register these drones as, homebrew. For filming, what I do is I build them, but then I give them to the owners, and they are responsible for it. So I haven't had to do that. And when I'm a pilot, I'm not flying my drones, so I'm also not registering them because they're not my property. Yeah. But technically, if they're being used for advanced operations, they should be registered and they should be following all the declarations. Yeah.
Well, and so the counter argument to that, for when you're on a set, you're in a closed environment. Crew are all briefed. You have safety briefings every morning. Like everyone has the tailgate meeting or the round table.
Yes.
And everyone knows, okay, this is what the drone's going to be doing. This is the shot. The over people component to that goes out the window because now everyone's essential to the operation of the drone.
Yes.
The controlled airspace thing, well, you can slap a GPS on it and call it good. Basically, it's a lot more complicated than that. Don't take me verbatim at me in the comments on that one. But it is essentially, to oversimplify the process, slap a GPS on it, make sure it's better than 10 or 15 meters X and Y, prove it is in your documents, and then technically call it good. But the reality is, like, most film sets aren't right in the vicinity of an airport.
And most of the time they're not.
Yeah.
They tend to avoid that for that very same purpose because it just adds more paperwork, more hurdles. Sometimes they're borderline to the airspace restriction, but I haven't seen it happening. And when it happens, they do have to go through the whole process, getting SFOCs and so on for that. For example, very recently there was a Gap 77 who was flying Niagara Falls, and that's definitely a no-fly zone. And I'm sure they went through the whole process of getting all that sanctioned.
And he's been doing some live downhill coverage.
Yes.
Was it in Banff, I think, a year ago?
Nelson, I think, and some other areas.
Yeah,
over
there was like Revelstoke, and
Revelstoke. Yeah.
I can't remember if he did or didn't end up doing something in a park, because we talked about the SFOC for the live event side of it. They wanted to have, I think it was a 10-inch. It was a pretty big platform with potentially a gimbal attached to it as well.
Yeah, and I think he went sub 250 for that very same reason. I think that's what he ended up doing. But in the States, it's a bit different, and he's been doing it, no problem apparently. But yeah, don't quote me on that.
Different process, different waivers.
Process, for sure.
So in that... when you went down to Peru, did you go with the drone, or did you build and
we built it? We built it. We actually built 4. Then we rebuilt them over there because they had some issues. But yeah, I didn't fly with them, but I did fly them in Peru a couple times. Yeah.
So on-site tech support.
Exactly. So that's one of the benefits as well. If you get into drone racing or just drone building, is that once you're on set, if you're using them for filming, then you kind of know your ins and outs of how to fix things, because it happens a lot. Even if you haven't crashed it, something would blow out and you'll have to fix it ASAP on set, with all the pressure. I tend to tell people that the racing is probably like the best school you can ever get for like drone building, drone flying, because during a race day, you also like that. Like you're nonstop flying, nonstop fixing, nonstop like doing things, running around, and it's just a great, learning experience.
Yeah, you're trial by fire almost.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in a lot of situations.
Exactly.
So back to the racing then. You have a MAC field.
Yes.
Right? And part of KwadsRus, you have your own MAC facility so that you can do these events and not sidestep the regs process, but like it facilitates you being able to build these things and quickly do it and get out in the air. What is the best way for someone that's getting into this? And you've talked about getting a bind and fly. So something pre-built that's like one step past the DJI stuff and into a full kit that probably comes with goggles and a transmitter and the drone and batteries and all this. What's the first flight look like for them? Like, how do they get good?
I would say today the best way is to try with the simulator before actually flying the drone. Just to get a hang with the radio, because you have these sticks that seem kind of natural, but they're not really that natural, especially when you're flying acro. It behaves a bit differently than you would expect. So it's better and safer and cheaper to just crash on the simulator than crashing your brand new build that you just built or the bind and fly you just bought, right? So there's a few simulators out there. The most common one for racing is called a Velocidrone.
Right.
But there's also the DRL simulator, the DCL simulator. I mean, if you just go on Steam, you just type, a drone simulator, you'll find easily 15 these days. There's some really good.
Uncrashed.
There's the Tip, I think it was, Tip something. That one is also very, very cool because it has these amazing sceneries. You can even fly a scene lifter, put a Komodo camera on top and just simulate that.
Practice it.
Yeah, practice.
Cool.
And it has like some of these simulators, they also have like bikers or car drivers.
That's
and
right.
You can just follow them
Yeah.
and practice that kind of chase, because the chasing is also very challenging sometimes.
Yeah.
You think it's easy, but it's not. You tend to orbit a lot and if you want to do the shot. So the sim is definitely the best way.
Yeah.
Then once you get kind of familiar with the control sticks and with your drone, maybe joining a local race like ours. If you're in the Lower Mainland, we tend to do every other week an event. if it's indoors or outdoors. Like you mentioned in PDMOs, we do outdoors mostly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's either events or also practice sessions that we have. They're open, they're free. People can just come in as long as they have Mac. They can just fly with us and test their drones, do a couple gates or do the whole track. Sometimes people are really good at it. Once they've done the sim, they come and they just fly the first time on the racetrack, and they're really, really good at it. And you just have to stick to it and keep doing it and repeat and repeat.
Let's talk about, so coming to the field, what's like good habits or etiquettes, or what should you bring in terms of gear? I've come and crashed your party a couple times with DJI gear, and it's always been a bad time for everyone else because and this is where I'm getting is the DJI stuff does not talk nice to other stuff. Like this is all analog, right?
This is actually HD0. So it's a different tech, but a very similar, very close to analog video transmission. But yeah, the DJI video transmission is very proprietary, and it does something that's called channel hopping. So it's not very friendly with other tech. It's very friendly with the same tech though.
Yeah.
It uses AquaSync, so they kind of talk together and they don't hop on their channels, but these will hop onto this channel, or the harmonics of the video transmission could, kind of like add some interference with these, and people will start crashing because I don't see who plug in on a DJI.
It's just like closing your eyes mid-flight.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like once you have no video, like you're pretty much done. Like
I've seen the looks of exasperation. So one thing I've learned, like you always shout plugging in when you're plugging in a battery, because as soon as you put a battery into any of these things, they start transmitting.
You're transmitting, and that's one big no-no. Whenever you show up to either a race or even just flying with other people, you have to always be careful of not plugging in the battery of your drone while all the people are flying, because you don't know what kind of repercussion that can cause. So the best is always to plug in all at the same time, all waiting to be ready and then go. That's the way that we do it, and most people do it these days.
Wow. So I guess like we don't really want to get too specific, but like this system, so you mentioned that's running HD0.
Yes. All of them are actually running HD0, even this little one.
Okay. Wow. So they make transmitters that small, eh?
Yeah. And actually this is the new all-in-one. It's a 5-in-1 flight controller. So it has ESCs, flight controller, and HD0 all in one board.
Wow.
Yeah. So there used to be 2 boards, but now it's just 1 board. So it's lighter. And it's just amazingly compact. It has all the features that you might want in one single board.
What's the name of that one?
So the flight controller is all-in-one. I think it's what brand was this? I forgot the brand, but it's just one brand, HD0 flight controller.
Okay.
But this is a Mobula, Mobula 6 Happy model, flight tiny whoop.
Kit, and it comes as a kit.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a buy and fly. You buy the drone, and it comes with, I think, a couple batteries. You still have to buy the goggles and the radio.
Yeah.
But this is already a pretty good deal. You can get them locally or like in different stores online.
Yeah. SN Hobbies is a good local shop.
SN Hobbies. You also have Roto Village, two
Village,
good Canadian hobby stores that you can get.
Yeah.
But you can get them online in the States or in China.
Ballpark price for that drone?
If I remember correctly, it was between 250 and 300 Canadian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not super cheap, but it's also not super expensive.
Yeah.
It's mostly because of the board is pretty expensive. One everything compacting in one board.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot of tech. And yeah.
So one of the upsides I see with building your own stuff is cross compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
DJI is not bad. Like they're pretty good when you consider that we're onto the 3rd or 4th generation goggles now, basically on the digital system.
Mm-hmm.
There's rumors out there that AquaSync 4 is coming out pretty quick.
Yep.
Yeah, like the module, which is a universal module, you apply power to it, it's got its own camera, and you hook an antenna up to it, it's a transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what's in this, right, at a commercialized level, same as what's in that, but it only talks with DJI stuff.
Yep.
HD0, analog, there are DJI systems, there's a bunch of different systems out there, but in theory, you can buy one set of goggles and that should last you years not 1 or 2 generations of DJI drones. Like you could use the same video transmitter system once you settle on one, the same goggles. And the other cool thing about it is everyone else can see it. Like you've got this elaborate video reception system that you can then rebroadcast and stream, right? So, and that's all running on HD0.
What we have, for that video stream is all running HD0, but analog as well. It's compatible with both.
Okay.
One cool thing that HD0 has done, which is a completely different company, is that they've tried to be as compatible with analog as possible. So, say for example, there's this Event VRX that they have analog and HD0 receivers. So it either switches between analog and HD0. They now have also a little monitor that you can just have one, channel at a time, but it's analog and HD0. You can't really do that with DJI, unfortunately, because it's proprietary. So unless DJI releases something, you'll be able to do it. Whereas HD0 is open source. Anybody can develop something if they wanted to.
Yeah.
The only thing that's not open source is the chip, but then you can license the chip and then you can expand. But it's open for business if you wanted to do something. Same thing with analog. It's super old technology. You can do whatever you want with it. So the reason why I think these kind of tech is sticking on into the racing community and in general just the FPV drone hobby is because it's a more accessible technology. It's more into the tinkering kind of spectrum, and you can do whatever you want to do with it, and you can expand your knowledge and so on.
Okay. So we talked a bit about racing. We talked about building drones a little bit. Where does it go from here? So one thing that we've been fortunate, we were able to sponsor a team.
Yeah.
Right? You're another part of your drone world is Team Canada FPV.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
So I'm essentially the team manager of Team Canada FPV. This team essentially formed many years ago before any team existed. Actually, it's the first FPV drone racing team in the world.
Wow.
Back in 2016.
Wow.
It started with Gab77 and Ryan Walkers. Both of them were in Quebec. And the team has been recruiting the best pilots in Canada to go compete worldwide since then. Wow. They've been in different events in the States, in Hawaii, in Ireland. Last year, we went to Namwon, Korea. We're graciously sponsored by Koso Drone last year for that event. This year, we went to Shenzhou, China as well for competing. 4 of us went and competed. There was 32 participating countries, 107 pilots. It was a big event. So if we're talking about, the Drone Racing League, which is a kind of closed league, this is a different kind of spectrum of the drone racing community. It's organized by a big association called the FAI, so the Federation of Air Sports.
Wow.
It does all kinds of different air sports, and drone racing is part of that.
I was going to say, don't they do, that's like the Red Bull races as well?
They used to do the Red Bull races, but then Red Bull took it off on their own, and then they stopped doing it. But essentially, there's like a lot of actual, helicopter and actual plane flying and competitions. There's a parachute, competitions. There's everything that's air-related sports, they do. And one little branch of it, it's air modeling. So they do pilot air modeling and all kinds of different air modeling, sports, and drone racing is part of one of them. And every year they do something called the World Drone Racing Championship. It tends to happen in China, one, because of budget, but also because of big community. Not China, sorry, Asia.
Okay.
At the last few times it's been China, then Korea, now this year in China. Next year it's going to be in China as well. And it's kind of like the closest we get to a Olympics drone racing, kind of experience.
When you said 32 countries?
32 countries, yeah.
And the average team is a half dozen, or?
So every team is up to 5 pilots cap. Our team was 4 this year. Last year we were 5. And if you're a hosting country, you can be up to 10. If you're a previous hosting country, you can be up to 10 as well. So Korea, they had 10 pilots. Oh, wow. China had 10 pilots, which doesn't really make it very fair, but whatever. But it's still very, very fun. And these tracks are like big tracks, on a big stadium. massive kind of like show, live stream, and so on. So it's a completely different level. It's not grassroots MultiGP.
How many days is the competition? Because this is like a ton of heats, 32
Yes.
countries. Right?
Yes.
So,
So there's it's 3 days.
Wow.
And because of that many competitors, it's also less flying, right? And that's where the challenge comes into. Like you get to fly max three times for
Wow.
qualifying, so it makes it really challenging for you to be able to qualify and to be able to
Pressure's
compete.
on.
Pressure's on, yeah. But Canada did pretty good this year. We overall team we classed 17th.
Okay.
Out of 32, so that was pretty decent. We're pretty happy with that standing, even though we had video issues. We were talking about video a moment ago, where video interference is a big thing when you're flying FPV drones. The problem when it's a big stadium, the track is made of metal.
Yeah.
You're far apart from the track. There's a bunch of components that make the experience very hard. And in this case, the video was awful. It was super hard to fly, unfortunately so. But I mean, we still managed to go through and finish.
And that kind of drives the innovation side of this as well.
Yeah.
Right? You're constantly problem solving and
Yes.
coming up with ways to fix this.
Well,
So-
it's funny because competitors over there, like everybody was having that challenge, so everybody started building things. And
Okay.
at one point, everybody had towers with antennas, like patch antennas,
Yeah.
pointing to specific locations where the track was bad. And everybody had their own little tower. They were connecting the goggles just to have slightly better signal.
Yeah.
But it's funny to see that kind of tinkering where like people were trying to adapt to that environment.
What's the community like? Is it super competitive at that level, or is it still kind of friendly?
It is pretty competitive, but it has its also friendliness at some points. Everybody still tries to help each other. There's obviously some rivals that they don't help each other, because if not, it's not going to help them. But in general, like everybody's very welcoming. Everybody's trying to help out just because they know the struggles.
Wow. And is the event streamed or what?
It was streamed. Unfortunately, because YouTube is blocked in China,
Right.
it had to be removed from their YouTube afterwards.
Okay.
But it was streamed at one point. Yeah.
Okay. So Team Canada, what else are we wanted to hit some points here today?
I think we hit all the points.
We talked a lot.
We did talk a lot.
What? Okay. So you've mentioned KwadsRus. Let's make
Yep.
sure we mention again. Team Canada FPV, Model Airplane Association of Canada
Yes.
is a big part of this as well. What else? What would someone getting into this, like, what do you want them to take away from this today?
Yeah, what's like your number? Someone who doesn't have a drone, has never built a drone before, but they want to do it. What's your number one piece of advice?
I would think, Facebook is a good platform for people that are getting into things and wanting to ask questions. It used to be back in the days forums, but Facebook is kind of like a forum. We have a group on Facebook. It's called KwadsRus, if you look it up. But there's many groups as well on Facebook where you can ask all the questions. And people are always very welcoming, and there's always those kind of bunch where like, oh, you should know better by this. But
The drone cops.
exactly, the drone cops, the keyboard warriors, all those people. But those aside, everybody is very welcoming in this hobby. Everybody's trying to help out, because we all of us started with like cheap toys, and we understand the struggle of like getting into it. That the one piece of advice I would say is like, don't get disappointed too quick about this hobby. I mean, it is pretty steep learning curve, but once you go through those hurdles, you'll enjoy it and you'll have fun with it.
And it's not the end of the world if you smoke your drone.
It is not. You can always buy new parts. It's just you need the time. I think going back in time is what it's a problem. It's like, oh, I should have done this and that. And I was like, don't worry about it. Just redo it again and repeat until you figure it out, and it's fine.
Yeah.
We should rebuild yours.
Yeah, we should finish it. Rebuild it.
Yeah.
We should just finish it, period.
Yeah, rebuild implies that it was ever built.
Well, at least get it flying.
Yeah, let's get it flying. All right. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on, Ignacio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's
fun.
been interesting and exciting.
Cam, is there anything from the chat?
Yeah, so this is kind of what we're going to probably lean into now is, Ignacio, where can we find you? That's Boyko is asking a question of where we can find you. So plug your socials, plug whatever you want to plug. Now's the time.
Sure. Well, there's different ways. We have a website. It's not the best website, but it's one website. You can just type kwadsrus.org. So KwadsRus, it's WADSRUS.org. It's basically kind of like Toys R Us, but KwadsRus. Quads because it's a quadcopter. That's our short way of calling these drones. We don't like the term drone, so we try to stick away from that. So yeah, KwadsRus.org. We have a Facebook group as well, KwadsRus. And yeah, if you download the MultiGP iPhone and Android app, by just logging in, you'll see nearby races. You'll see all the KwadsRus races. There's also another group here that's called Van Whoop, so Vancouver Tiny Whoop, and they organize little Tiny Whoop races as well.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for watching this episode about professional FPV drone pilot extraordinaire Ignacio Romero. What's your race name?
Zenith.
Zenith?
Yeah.
Zenith.
Yeah.
All right. So look for Zenith on MultiGP. And again, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you again next week and appreciate you watching this. So see you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.